it's not too beyond, unreasonable, shall we say, to say that, especially people on the right, and the further right you go, um, almost have this bizarre theory that somehow, especially in the UK, that the left runs everything, despite the fact that they are the ones in power and have an overall majority. Everything that seems to go wrong, oh no, it's those evil cultural Marxists that are in power. And you're like, can you point me to one? And then they'll point to someone who might be in Labour or might have been on like Jeremy Corbyn's front bench, and you're just like, they're there, but they're not in power. you know. Um, I mean, you've only got to look at Trump's campaign slogans, and he's constantly talking about how Joe Biden is going to kowtow to socialists, and yet I can't think of a single. And remember, Bernie Sanders isn't a full socialist; he's a democratic socialist. And I can't even think of someone, in the US politically who is like a full open socialist. So, you know, it it's really hard to try and see why it is, but it's a constant myth on the right. And someone here from the London School of Economics wrote about this, and I think this is a really good article on this. So, the title of the article is called "Why Does the Right Keep Pretending the Left Runs Britain?" So, most of my students would struggle to name any cultural Marxists that work for social theorists such as Theodore Andorra, pioneer of the so-called cultural turn in post-war Marxist studies. It is barely taught in humanities and social science departments these days, but both of the mainstream and fringes of the political right, and you'd get the impression that cultural Marxism is the reigning religion of the West. The term the ideological enemy of the right-wing terrorist Anders Breivik has become a oh dear, has become a shorthand for left-wing takeover of practically everything, a relentless invocation by politicians and commentators. There are many. These are many, many, and we'll see them all the time, President Trump has said in his latest Republican National Convention speech, warning about the wild-eyed Marxist to whom Joe Biden would be unable to stand up to, and who would continue to a quote a Trojan horse for socialism in the United States. In the United Kingdom, the spectre of a Marxist takeover is also invoked across the right-wing spectrum, including the Attorney General. The Conservative commentators like to claim that the left in Britain controls almost every institution. So what exactly is going on here? Simple answer, control. And it cannot refer to the classical liberal notion of a representative government. Winning elections and forming governments that promote left-wing principles and policies. It cannot mean that because when it comes to political representation, the left in Britain has been in opposition for the best part of the last 100 years. Even in the few cases in which it succeeded in winning elections, it did so while relinquishing traditional left-wing commitments, promoting an image of itself as a competent and pragmatic, neither right nor left. And control can also not be meant in the Marxist sense of controlling the means of production, or determining the mechanisms of property and income distribution. Half of England is owned by less than 1% of its population. Millions of children go hungry. More than a third of British workers risk their very health in precarious, low-paid or unfulfilling employment. If this is what the left being in control looks like, how have we come through the pandemic where capitalists are getting richer while workers die at disproportionate rates? So it must be something else then. And this is where another European thinker comes in useful. The Italian Marxist Antonio Galsambi coined the term cultural hegemony. which he meant the capacity to exercise influence in society through educational institutions, the arts, or the media. And when the right claims that the left is in control, it is pulling the Grenzian move. They know the left has no political or economic power, but can claim it nevertheless that it pervades society and culture. For the right, those who question the legacy of empire or making efforts to decolonize university curriculums have created a situation in which the very underpinnings of Western liberal democracies are being subverted and destroyed. Instead of asking why so many of the songs we sing, roads we walk down, or statues we pass certain traces of an injustice whose legacy continues to shape the present, Conservative MPs are urged to be the vanguard of the opposition to the left's remorseless cancel culture. It would be a formidable achievement for the left that has neither adequate political opposition in both Britain and the US, and the leading progressive parties in opposition are run by either centre or right factions, nor are any kind of significant control over the economy to be culturally hegemonic. Ideas and discourse do not float in the air. They reflect the wider societal patterns. The same ruling elites who shape politics and the economy also shape the intellectual debate. That's why businesses and sciences are most subscribed courses at university, rather than supposedly left-wing humanities. Why the economy is unthinkingly covered in much of the press from the point of view of asset owners. Why large corporations play a demeaning role in producing culture and the arts. If those who fan the flames of the culture war cared about protecting culture, they would not have spent the last decade shutting public libraries. If they cared about knowledge and free speech, they would not have engaged in campaigns to undermine the publicly funded education system, from elementary schools to universities. If they cared about truth, they would not govern by lying. The fantasy of the left-wing hegemony in right-wing countries is not about principles, but tactics. The wrong life cannot be lived rightly, Antonio famously wrote in 1951. He meant that when opposition pervades societal structures, isolated progressive structures, and piecemeal politics to enfranchise marginal groups are always defeated. They are subordinate to the same logic of profit-making that produced their marginalisation in the past. Cultural Marxists explain how narratives develop to ensure that those who would have reason to protest against a failing system end up being co-opted, and how progressive struggles lose ground just as they have started to gain momentum. This is emphasized that it was not enough to focus on material impression. One must also understand the forms of injustice based on discourse, symbols, and culture, and learn from the conflicts that they provoke. The culture war against Marxism does not exactly what the original cultural Marxist wanted it to be. It ensures that having a secured political power and concentrated economic resources to the detriment of the many, the right can continue to ensure that capitalists remain unchallenged. When representative political institutions fail, and when the economic systems face crisis, its worst crisis since the Great Depression, the only way to secure compliance is to demonize left-wing alternatives. By trying to rationalize the false notion that national values are at risk of disappearing at the hands of powerful leftists. The right can mobilize support for those in power, despite the sorry state of the economy or disastrous outcome of public policy. The splinter in the eye is the best magnifying glass. And that was another of Anzo's famous sayings. The war against cultural Marxism exists to ensure that we are all turned blind. And that is generally true. We see this on a day-to-day basis. For example, the Financial Times. We've covered some stories from the Financial Times over the many years focusing on Brexit, but you would never ever see someone from the left writing in the Financial Times a review of economics from a left-wing perspective. They all are, from, as said there, someone who is a capital owner's perspective. That is the way it's written. And to say that the left is somehow power or has, is there, it's nowhere near close. And we were somewhat close with Jeremy Corbyn, but Corbyn was massively undermined by media, culture, his own party. But, there we go. But that's no reason to give up being a leftist and continue to fight for these left-wing ideas. Even now, more important, there needs to be more criticism coming from the left to criticise our current economic structure, our political source and discourse. One of the things that I'm going to heavily start pushing on this channel is going to be a massive sea change in the way of our political system should be framed currently. I fully believe that the next thing we need to do is push for a massive reform of our electoral system. I fully believe we need to go to a proportional representative system in Parliament that is based on the percentage vote of everyone who votes. I think this would be absolutely fantastic. Not only that, but get the House of Lords changed to that as well, which would also be fantastic. But also so that voting, for example, so when we have a vote, rather than have it on arbitrarily just on Thursday, we should have it on Friday, and those Fridays should be national holidays, so that everyone, regardless, has a chance to vote. Not only that, but voting should take place over 2 days. So you've got the national holiday on the Friday, and then it continues on to the Saturday as well, so that everybody, regardless, has 2 days in which they can go and vote. Not only that, postal voting should be made open and available to all as well. I think the more people you get into vote, the better. And worryingly, as we mentioned just last week, we are already seeing moves to get rid of the Electoral Commission, which oversees our democratic elections and how they function. And worryingly, if that goes, we could see the Tories bring in what they've brought in America, with people have to have IDs and so on, which makes it harder for poor people and minorities to vote, because the classic Tory saying, you can't have the poors voting, because in reality we outnumber them. Unfortunately, a lot of people vote actively against their own interests. That's unfortunately a fact of life, but it's something that we need to do better on the left to get our ideas across in really simple, effective ways. And I think that's one thing that we do lack, especially on the left. So with that said, thank you for watching. Please do hit that subscribe button and share this video. It helps out massively for the channel. And of course, we do talk about British politics a lot on this channel, as well as Brexit, because you can't separate one from the other. So with that said, thanks for watching, and we'll see you all next time.